Frankly, even mice have more humanity than Trump, Musk, and the GOP. Starts out with this quote from Captain Gustav Gilbert. He said he was the U.S. Army psychologist who was assigned to the Nuremberg trials to try to come up with a psychological profile of the defendants. What is it that we can learn about these men who chose the final solution, who killed 6 million people intentionally? Men, women, and children. What is it that we can learn about observing them, that might help us prevent something like this in the future? So this is the quote that he gave. He said, "In my work with the defendants at Nuremberg, I was searching for the nature of evil, and I now think I've come close to defining it. It's a lack of empathy. That's the one characteristic that connects all the defendants, a genuine incapacity to feel with their fellow men." This is just an amazing story. This has been cranked up recently by this quote from Elon Musk when he was on Joe Rogan's show, where he said, "The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, the empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. I think empathy is good, but you need to think it through and not just be programmed like a robot." End of quote. I have seen my share of psychopaths, probably far more than most people. I used to be the executive director of a residential treatment facility for severely abused kids. And I would say probably at least half, maybe 3/4 of the parents that we had to interact with, people who had, tried to kill their children, who had beaten them, who had raped them, who had done just terrible things to them. One of the first kids we did intake on, the neighbors had called the police because of a smell from the house. It turned out that dad had tied this kid and his brother to a couple of poles in the basement, and the brother had died and his body was rotting when they found him. I mean, that kind of thing, right? I have seen my share of psychopaths. And I can tell you, that's the observer at Nuremberg was absolutely right. Lack of empathy is the key to the whole thing. And there's been a debate, throughout the psychological history, I mean, going back before Freud, about what is it with this very small percentage of people in the population, somewhere between 1% and 5%, depending on how you define psychopathy, that, why is it that some people seem to be born with no empathy? Or is it nature or nurture? Are they born that way? Or, is this the result of a terrible childhood or something like that? And to this day, nobody knows. I mean, like I said, it's still an ongoing debate. In fact, on the nature side, there are people who say, oh, this is the gene we got from the chimpanzees. Chimps engage in warfare. This is the gene we got from chimps that enabled us to kill off the Neanderthals and conquer the planet. On the other hand, there are people who say, predictably, terrible childhoods produce psychosis or mental illness anyway. So this is, what we're watching right now as Musk and his buddies are gutting Social Security gleefully. Shut down USAID, which today has already led to the death of thousands of mostly children in the third world, and will lead to the death of millions of people. And this was only 0.3% of our federal budget. I mean, you were probably paying $5 in taxes for USAID. But, these guys are just gleeful about it. So where does this come from? Where does this embrace of psychopathy, where does this embrace of a lack of empathy come from in the GOP? Well, I believe it really comes from, or really started with the deification of Ayn Rand back in 1980 with the Reagan administration. Paul Ryan, remember when he was Speaker of the House? That wasn't in 1980, but a few years later, but required all his new interns into his office to read Ayn Rand's works. Donald Trump says that the best novel he ever read was The Fountainhead. It's a novel about a woman who gets raped and then decides she liked it. And Ayn Rand had a very specific role model in mind for her heroes. And that was a guy by the name of William Edward Hickman. In 1927, 10 days before Christmas, he kidnapped a 12-year-old girl, murdered her, traded her dead body to her father, who didn't realize she was dead, for ransom, for a year's salary and ransom. And then, later got caught, here in Oregon, in fact, and was hanged. But it was considered the worst crime of the 1920s. It was just a horror show. I won't go into all the details. It's in my article if you want, actually, the reports where, how he just bragged about how he killed her, how he cut up her body, threw body parts out the windows of the car, all this kind of stuff. But for Ayn Rand, whose real name was Alyssa Zenovova Rosenbaum, and she was a 21-year-old Russian political science student in 1928, when she had come to the United States 2 years earlier. She saw this guy as an absolute hero. She wrote about it at length in her diaries. She hero-worshipped William Hickman. She said that he was the man, he was the ideal man, her phrase. She said, she's talking about the case of his murder trial. She said, the first thing that impresses me about the case is the ferocious rage of the whole society against one man. It is not the crime that alone has raised the fury of public hatred. It is the case of a daring challenge to society. It is the amazing picture of a man with no regard whatever for all the society holds sacred, with a consciousness all his own. And she says the newspapers turned, quote, a brilliant, unusual, exceptional boy into a purposeless monster. She writes about Danny Renahan, the hero of one of her novels, who is based on Hickman. He was born with the spirit of Argon and the nature of an imperial feudal lord, imperious, impatient, uncompromising, untamable. She goes on like that. This is the woman who really put libertarianism, it was called objectivism, her version of it, but it's the same thing essentially as libertarianism, on the map. And the result of this is what we're seeing right now. The Republican Party, since the 1980s, has embraced a lack of empathy, psychopathy, and has rejected empathy, has rejected the historic American idea that we created our government for the purpose of promoting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No, she would say. No, we created our government so that brilliant people can become rich. And this is the story that Republicans are telling themselves. So, and the most amazing part of the story is that when they anesthetize a mouse and put it near a stranger mouse, the stranger mouse will try to do CPR on that mouse. Even mice, and this is a brand new study, it was just published in Science last month, even mice have more empathy than the people running our government right now. Think about that.